This past weekend, Shueisha held its annual Jump Festa event, where all of your favorite Shonen Jump properties showcased recent and upcoming news. Yugioh was there, of course, and among the 2 days of announcements was a rather big one for Rush Duel. But not an English release date, of course. No, Jump Festa brought us the announcement of Rush Duel's first ever limit regulation list, and beginning from January 2023, Rush Duel will be receiving regular Banlist updates just like the other Yu-Gi-Oh formats. While the actual list itself is currently very small, consisting of only 3 cards, this is a pretty big deal as it means Konami's giving actual consideration to Rush Duel as another form of competition under the Yu-Gi-Oh IP, as opposed to existing solely as a casual game mode for kids and jaded boomers, like me. There are some other implications that adopting a restriction list suggests, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. I'd also like to preface this look into the list by saying that I'm only passively familiar with Rush Duel's metagame. Interacting with people in a language you can barely speak to play a game you can barely read is frankly terrifying, so I'm pretty much winging this one off of observations and a broad understanding of TCGs as a whole. The number 7 is a very prominent feature of Rush Duel, so let's start with the level 7 monster, Thunderbolt the Lightning Fire Deity. On the turn it's summoned, you can mill 1 to gain 300 attack for the turn, putting it at a respectable 2700. Doesn't sound too bad, but if you have 4 or more level 7 monsters in your graveyard afterwards, you can special summon one of them. With a second Thunderbolt, you can fill your entire board with big level 7 beatsticks and make big damage pushes, but that's only half of the story. Can Melody shuffles one of your opponent's set cards into their deck at the cost of returning another level 5 or higher monster on the field to your hand. Then, if you have lower life points than the opponent, you can also add a level 1 psychic normal monster from your graveyard to your hand. Basically, Thunderbolt summons Melody, Melody returns Thunderbolt and Candide to your hand to remove a set card, then you tribute both psychics for Thunderbolt and repeat until the opponent has no cards left to defend themselves. Since you can easily splash this into just about any deck regardless of theme, it makes sense to hit this one. Next up is the spell card Secret Order. This card special summons a level 7 normal monster from your graveyard, then gives it 700 attack until the end of the turn. Currently, the base attack of normal monsters caps at 2500, so at 3200, the monster summoned with this card can beat nearly every non-maximum monster in battle. Already strong enough for a card as it is, but just in case that wasn't enough, Secret Order also prevents the monster it summons from being destroyed by trap cards that turn, locking the opponent out of a lot of options for counterplay. Like Thunderbolt, Secret Order could be easily slotted into just about any deck, as a level 7 vanilla will usually be your biggest damage dealer anyway. However, it was typically paired with a similar card in the form of Parallel Birthgate, creating the Gate Order deck that would rise to be one of the top decks of the metagame. By focusing on solely the vanilla beatdown strategy, a player would have more space to commit to generic utility cards to cover potential weaknesses, such as removal for back row or position changers and piercing to deal with defense monsters. Parallel Birthgate is still pretty suspect on its own, but this was another sensible hit. Finally, we have Necromaid Nana, which seems a lot more innocent in comparison to the other two at first glance. She's a level 5 monster that tributes herself to return a level 7 monster in your graveyard to the bottom of the deck and draw 2. From what I've been told, Nana's used as part of what was essentially an infinite resource loop with the card Progress Potter, allowing you to keep fishing for draws until you get a more ideal hand. But you can kinda still just do that anyway. It is understandable to want to hit loops like this, however, as it essentially removes decking out as a loss condition. Cards like Fiber Jar or Pokemon's Lysander's Trump card are banned for exactly that reason, and even games like Vice Schwartz and Wheatcross that don't have decking out as a loss condition still apply a damage penalty every time a player's deck is emptied. Personally, I'm still somewhat confused by the Nana limit, but I can somewhat understand it from the perspective of how, just like the other 2 cards on this list, it's easy enough to just splash it into any deck. Overall, the theme of this first restriction list seems to be an attempt at preventing decks in Rush Duel from becoming too homogeneous. As it stands, there are already a good amount of staple cards in a lot of decks, And while there's nothing inherently wrong with that, even Konami has acknowledged it can make the game boring if it reaches a certain extent. The most important part of implementing a restriction list is the effect that it'll have on card design moving forward. Remember how Secret Order gives monsters trap protection? It's not alone there, with a large number of cards printed after the game's first year having or granting the same effect. This is all primarily a side effect of the card Dark Liberation, which has somewhat defined the game since its inception. As essentially a combination of Pot of Avarice and Mirror Force, it more than likely would have been limited if the list had been implemented earlier, before Spellcaster decks fell out of favor. My hope for the future is that Dark Liberation can simply be limited instead of designing cards around its existence, which would free up design space for more interesting card effects.